Hey there, folks. This is the Gauntlet Reading Club, and today we are discussing Tasha Suri's The Jasmine Throne, a story of queer desire in a temple haunted by the dead gods, and the first book in her Burning Empire Trilogy. Before starting in on things, I wanted to do a round of introductions for folks watching. If you could give your name, your pronouns, and your kind of first impression of the book, like your one sentence response to it, that would be great. We'll start with me and go clockwise around the stream. I'm Stephen, he, him. I am the sort of current facilitator for the book, for the Gauntlet Reading Club, and I'm going to be running our run of Hearts of Wu Lin, inspired by this book later on. My kind of first response was, this is like my second time coming back to the book, and it's a book that, I'm suddenly forgetting now. It's a book that kind of, for me, really kind of is always in competition in my head with another book that came out the same year, She Who Became the Sun. As they kind of, for me, they feel like they have a lot of thematic similarities. I also really like that book. That's by Shelley Parker Chan. You should read it. I guess, like, coming back to this book, I guess it's just whatever book, like, I read most recently, I like more. But I really was kind of, like, happy to come back and kind of like, oh yeah, all this stuff about, like, becoming monstrous. This was why I really loved this book back when I first read it. And so that's kind of me. If we could go around to you, Michael.
Sure. So I'm Michael. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. And I really liked that book. I didn't prepare any like one sentence summary, but there's so many interesting topics. The way imperialism is depicted, the way family, found family, or actually a related family is depicted, and how you perceive yourself and how you are perceived. That's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to discussing those topics with you.
You're muted. Stephen, if you're talking, you're muted.
Oh, I just lost the tab. Chris, if you wanted to go next.
Sure. I'm Chris, he, him pronouns. I was really... I think this book does a fantastic job of, like, presenting diversity of viewpoints and cultures, and using that as a means of exploring, like, the way that violent revolution and just violence as a political tool is motivated. And it's real neat. Y'all should read it.
Awesome. And Brandon?
I really enjoyed both the Indianness of it, and in fact the way the author deals with it, by using Indian terms, especially for food and clothing, that are relatively familiar, to create an atmosphere that conjures up the rest of it without deluging the reader in a lot of foreign terms, that Hindi terms that might not be familiar. I thought that was very effective. I really like the detail given to the Ahirani, religion, and the description of the Hirana, the temple of the old gods, and it gave a very, very solid, spooky feel to that, and it made obviously that's the major subject of Priya's quest, in the early going, and that felt it felt very real. It was I thought I liked the protagonist's stance, that she, where she was obviously something special, but she didn't really. She had to get things done even before coming into her own, and even when she came into her own, she had to deal with people who were, were stronger than she was, even in that regard. And of course, the tropes of people who were once your friends and are now your enemies, and vice versa, is a very strong, good, dramatic one, and I really liked that. There's some things that I didn't appreciate as much about it, but I'll hold on to those for a moment.
Cool. Yeah, so I think something that we there are a couple different things we hit on during those kinds of brief responses, but I guess I kind of want to first off kind of get us back to something you brought up, Michael. You brought up the idea of self-image, and I think this relates a little bit to what you were saying as well, Brandon. Like the way that a lot of the novel revolves around how characters are capable or allowed to sort of define themselves, and the way that in some sense, like, taking on that right to define oneself is necessarily to sort of breaking from how other people define you is always to become sort of a little bit monstrous.
Yes, and then she uses that term literally in a couple of places. I also, related to that is how much questions of trust, who you trust and how much you trust, and not only to define your relationships, but they also define you. Whether, if you are a person who trusts too well or too easily, that you're actually, a terrible person. It's not, it's the idea, which is found in a number of Oriental cultures in particular. Those are the ones that I know of that showing your, I'm most familiar from Japanese literature, where, showing your face and showing your heart are not considered virtues. You're expected to have many faces, as the author references here once. The idea that you have different faces for different people, and are any of them your true face, really? Maybe you don't even show yourself your true face. And I think that's very powerful, because in so much, in so many of these stories, the victory is achieved, when the heroic people, believe in each other and trust fully and things like that. And I very much like the complexity of trust is not necessarily your friend in a complicated, difficult scene like this.
Yeah. Hey there, Joe. And that was a great point, Brandon. I'm wondering if we could we're just do a quick introduction of names and pronouns, because I know there are a lot of new people to the Gauntlet here, who might not necessarily know Joe, and vice versa. I'm Steven, he, him, and we'll just go clockwise.
Cool. I'm Michael, he, him, or they, them.
I'm Chris, he, him.
Brandon, he.
Jolene, she, her.
Yeah, so you just kind of came in. We were just sort of talking about self-image and sort of the way that people sort of are expected in the novel to kind of take on different kind of selves for different situations, and sort of how that plays into the kind of way that trust works in the book. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about any of that.
I mean, I see that. Thinking back on it, I had trouble with the book. Like, I bought it before I even saw the Gauntlet post, because I was just like, I want to listen to some lesbian fantasy fiction. What's good out there? This was the first result. And it was way into the fantasy more than the romance, which was like, oh, this was not what I was hoping for. And I didn't know it was the first of a trilogy, so... But yeah, like, I mean, those themes are very present, the way you discuss them, so it's just like, yeah, no, they, like, there's I can't remember, it's not Milani, it's the other one, or is it Milani? The
Priya?
one, yes, Priya is, like, being, like, torn between multiple factions, like, no, this is who you are, this is what you should be doing, and it's like, I don't know about that, and, like, then the end of it's also like that, it's like, oh, great. I just want my girls to kiss.
Well, Priya is the MacGuffin to a certain degree, in addition to being the protagonist. If the other factions all want, her to do what they want, which makes for a nice dramatic tension.
So I really like that the author uses that point of view technique, because, for example, a character is introduced, seen through the eyes of a certain, let's say, the protagonist, and I'm especially thinking of Bhumika, who's my favorite character. And at first she's mentioned like in a sentence by passing by, and yeah, that's the pregnant wife, and everyone thinks of her as being like really, I'm not sure how to put it, like yeah, the proper wife, and then you get to see her thoughts, and that happens with other point of view characters as well, and you get actually a really good picture of who she is, and then that also changes over the course of the book. And I really like that, because then you can see what they really are, but also that it's always you have to play a certain role, you have a persona, and that changes obviously depending on who you're with. But that's really interesting to me. And what Brendan just mentioned, I thought, yeah, that's perfectly Hearts of Woolen. She has the role for inner conflict so often.
I think all of those themes are like come to a really interesting point in the character of Malini, because she is like very, very deliberately portraying herself in every moment, even like, stripped to her barest, most vulnerable, like not, the book says multiple times that she does not even have her mind, but we see from her perspective that she is still like thinking as a manipulator and thinking about which truths to show people. And like I don't know how that resolves. I mentioned I only read half the book. So interesting narrative tension that I cannot fully comment on, which is going to come up a lot. Sorry, I can't be more I can't contribute more.
I appreciate the multiple viewpoint stance very much. I think I first read about it in James Clavell's books of Shogun and the like, where he switches. He has a couple of he has a main protagonist. He moves into the minds of a number of others with wonderful effect. And I do like the way that she does it here. I do feel that at a certain point, though, that that the author, I'm not sure it's through the use of this technique, but late in this book, I think that the pacing runs into trouble. That there's a critical scene out in the forest and trying to get the reluctant emperor to declare that he's going to usurp his brother, and then it devolves into these side scenes which are just characters talking to characters about how they feel, which might have a place otherwise, but put at the end there, it feels like a pause. And that's really the only thing about the book I didn't like, is that I felt that the movement of both the characters and the plot forward kind of died towards the end. Maybe as if the author kind of put the trilogy break in the wrong spot. But I'm not going to pretend to know what she was thinking. I just felt that the pacing was off.
I could definitely agree, in my opinion, that like the trilogy break felt like it was at the wrong spot. Because again, granted, I admit I was coming in for the one thing, and when they separate, I look down at my thing. I'm like, "There's 2 hours left. Like, what's going on? Like, this should be the end." And I was like, "What is I guess okay." So I was like, "All right." Yeah, like I'm used to. I'm familiar with the multi POV because I did some Game of Thrones reading previously. Similarly to I just got confused with a lot of them at times. I'm like, wait, which character is this and which character? Like, that's a me thing with audiobooks sometimes, because I'm like, all right, these names, they're not the main characters, so I don't think about them as much. Like Bhumika, I know who that one is, but like I don't know if Bhumika's husband had a POV or not, but I know like people he was up against probably had a POV, and I'm like, when was I introduced to these people? Do I remember? Or I'm like, but like, it's a well-written book, but it's just like overwhelming for me in a certain way, because it's I went in expecting one thing and got something way more.
Yeah, well, there's one chapter that's from the point of view of a guard, who gets killed in the chapter, and if you don't remember that name, then the chapter title is quite confusing. Whereas if they'd simply been treated as just a generic unnamed person. And we saw him, waiting in the corridor, and then the bad thing happens to him. She could have written the same thing, but when she names him, it actually makes it a little trickier.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things, like, just before this session, I was actually going back to the book because I was like, oh, I should make a note of all the character names so I remember them. And I realized then that this book, unlike so many other epic fantasy novels these days, doesn't have like a cast page at the very start, which struck me as like such a weird choice given like how many POV characters there are. Which was definitely like it is. I definitely understand, Jolene, that how the difficulty coming from audiobook. Yeah. Oh, it's at the end. That's where I was looking.
About to say.
Okay. Like, it avoids the Tolkien-ism of multiple names with the same first letter. So
well, that's because those aren't real characters. Like that, they are very much a collective unit as a narrative entity. They're not individuals.
Yeah. I think Game of Thrones ended up doing that at one point too. I'm like, there's a lot of these names that sound alike, and I will not be held accountable.
But, I think there's the joke that at a certain point in Game of Thrones, he runs out of fantasy names and just starts, like...
Job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fred. Yeah, this is Fred, the terrible. I think there's even a trope named after that or something. Fred the Terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me, I think, like, what? There's a joke about, like, Tiffany's a very old name, but you will never hear it in a fantasy novel. But it is from that time period.
Mm-hmm.
It is. There's certain names that any name that might be a character from Jersey Shore is never going to appear in a fantasy novel. It's just because it'd just be too jarring.
Oh, man. I mean... So, sorry, we are going into a little bit of a tangent, and this is the last thing I will say on this, but if we did do an epic fantasy novel based in the region of the Jersey Shore.
Yes, the Jersey Devil.
Yes.
It's just animal print everywhere.
Yeah, God. Yeah, it's just it's pretty much Jersey Shore is pretty much a fantasy. It's just an urban fantasy, suburban fantasy. Please feel free to use that genre if it ever happens.
Okay.
The way you say suburban makes it sound so much more ominous too,
Yes.
as opposed to suburban.
Yes.
But yeah, that was kind of one of the things of kind of going back to what we were originally talking about. Like, shifting over to Vikram was kind of really interesting because it was always kind of this play, like, Vikram just kind of going like, well, my wife just trusts me, and obviously I can just, like, expect her to do everything I want her to do, and she doesn't have any plans of her own. Because that was always kind of the sort of, I feel like Vikram, like, there was the most sort of black humor in the writing of his character, because you know that he's going to be betrayed. You know that everyone is betraying him. But he just refuses to see any of that, or just can't.
I found that a little jarring, the fact that, okay, this guy's the regent, right? He's a politician's politician, or he couldn't have this job. And yet he seems clueless, in so many ways.
Like, yeah, I guess the way I almost read him is that he's the politicians for, like, pleasing the throne in some ways, but, like, that sort of informs a lot of his worldview, that he just can't see certain things as, like, he claims to be sort of above, like that other regent Santosh who wants to take his position, but in a lot of ways he's pretty much as incapable of seeing, like, the agency of women and of the people of Ahiranya as Santosh's. Like, they are, like, basically, as in his words, sort of trained dogs.
Yeah. I mean, he's only slightly less a jerk than the designated jerk in the story. The designated jerk who's going to get it. He says Santosh has tattooed across his forehead. In this, I almost wanted Santosh not to buy it, because I felt that his getting killed was a stereotype.
What confused me a lot about, now I don't remember a lot of the details leading up to it, but Vikram was the one that, like, he was like tried to kill the nobility dudes that were related to the Empire as, like, cousins or something, right? Was that him?
No, that was Santosh.
Okay, Santosh wanted to kill the nobility guys that were related to the Emperor?
Eventually, like, I think the early time he was just having them do a raid. The first time that his guards show up, like, they were just doing a raid of for rebel activity that the princes were caught up in.
Okay,
And yeah,
I missed like him ever finding any connection between them and rebel stuff. So like when he was like trying to like arrest and or like kill them, I'm like, don't they have more power than you? Like, and he's like, this is for the Empire. I'm like, we're related to the Emperor, buddy. You're nothing. And I'm like, yeah, what grounds do you have, guard? So like I missed a lot of things that were like connecting dots because I mean it's long, so I usually listen while working, so that's also partly my problem. But like I'm like, wait, what? You're a city official. You have much less power than these people.
yeah, I think in the early chapters at least, they're like it's just that they're hanging out with rebels a lot, and so like when they show up to arrest the rebels, they're there, and the guards there are just like, well, we're just gonna arrest these guys. I don't know who they are.
Yeah, so I was like, this is what?
Well, one of them's also disguising the fact that he's, that he's nobility. So that's why. So he gets roughed up. But that was pretty cool.
Yeah, because I remember like, I guess it was Santosh. It was just like, God, I hate these princes, these jerks that just want to like show up and just drink and whore. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you, buddy.
That's the
Get over it.
I feel like I don't know what to tell you, buddy. Get over it is Santosh's entire character.
I mean, I think that literally is what Prem says to him at some point.
Like he's very much that guy.
He's also it's like most of Ariana's foreign exchange, comes from pleasure, right? So if you're against that,
and it's like, stay mad, bro. Like that's what it feels like with this guy. It's like, I'll be happy to see you dead. You're just so annoying.
Yeah, he was just Santosh was just unredeemably annoying. He wasn't even
they like go out of their way during the chapter from the guard that gets killed perspective to be like, and our Lord is being friends with this guy who everyone hates. From like even the lowest level we ever get to, people are like, shut the fuck up.
I think he is kind of a symbol of him and Vikram, how to colonialism works. And the one guy tries to appease the locals and marries a local girl who's noble and tries to reason with them, but he's an oppressor as well. But the other one is just violent and fanatic. And it was interesting to see both sides, and it was satisfying to see both of them fail eventually.
I would have found it more satisfying if either of them had been less two-dimensional.
Yeah. Oh,
I felt like they were basically given a job. Here's your script. Run your lines. And die. And it's like I don't really care about either of you.
And that's really interesting because that would be one of my main criticisms, that the bad guys who are men in this book are really bad and one-dimensional, especially the Emperor, and those guys as well. I mean, they're plot devices probably rather than characters.
I'm curious, Michael, because this is just thinking. Because what do you think of Pramilla's character then? That she is sort of the princess's keeper.
Yeah, I liked her. Well, not as a character, but how she's written, and she's got motivation, and she's in grief, and she's cruel to some extent as well because she's blaming the princess, and that was a good villain to me.
Yeah, Pramila was much more interesting than these other characters because you could at least sympathize. She was, acting out of anger. And you could at least understand that.
Yeah,
rather than just
hated her so much, but
dark.
like you're supposed to. So like,
yeah.
How dare you torture these girls.
But I think that's like a very interesting thing to talk about, how the women, by virtue of being sort of overlooked, are allowed to be more three-dimensional, and then the men, as the the very much the fulcrums upon which the colonial engine is built in a Hiranya, never do anything that they're not supposed to or expected to, because it would be too dangerous.
Even the ones that are not part of the colonial engine, a lot of them are two-dimensional.
Yeah, like the, I guess, the cult guy, right? The one that was sort of rivals to Boudica.
I don't even know who you're talking about.
Wasn't
Ashok. He's the one that runs the rebellion. The rebellion.
Yeah, he's like feeding everyone the, I don't know, the
Deathless
the
water.
river stuff or whatever.
Yeah, the deathless water.
Yes. That's giving everybody oak flesh, basically. And I was like, what are you doing, buddy?
He's angry. He's hurting. He's a creature of purpose because of what happened to him, and he is very much part of the, he's not an actual part of the machine, but he is very much a creature of the sort of colonial events that have happened.
Well, but he's a product of it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
everybody, but in that sense, everyone in the novel is part of the machine, then, right? If the people who are rebelling against the colonialist thing are considered part of the colonialist machine, then you can label everybody that way. So I'm not sure how useful that is. But she, most of the female characters have more attention paid to them. Even some of the sympathetic male characters, like Rao, he's grief stricken over events about which we don't really know very much. And so it's a little hard to sympathize with him.
And I won't lie, from the Jolene perspective, I was just waiting for him to make out with Malini's brother. I kind of was hoping for that.
That's what I want, just more kissing. Boys and boys, girls and girls. The hets can, they can step back for a book.
Guys in trees that one time.
Yeah, don't forget the trees.
Boys and trees.
It was one of the funny things. Like in one of my other book clubs, there was a scene where somebody got turned into a tree, and I'm like, oh, is this going to be a growing theme for book club now? Like people getting turned into plants.
It's they're botanicosexual literature.
Dendrophilia, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. I like dendrophilia. It's good.
So I'm curious, how did you guys like the magic and the body horror? That because it's all plant based as well.
I was into it.
It's vegan.
I was also into it, and I don't think that there is one notable exception that is not plant based, which is when it's describing the way that the deathless waters leave you when you're not when you drink it but aren't properly immersed. It's
or even when you are, I mean, it scrapes you out.
Yeah, no, but specifically, because I just read this literally an hour ago. There's this fantastic description of how the water flows out of you along with all of your blood, through your eyes, through your mouth, through your skin, and you are hollow. I think that's just a really neat image, and
It is.
a cool play on crying blood, which is in every fantasy novel.
Yeah, and of course there are also it's definitely implied at the very end that there is actual power behind the fate of the Burning Mothers. that fire is also going to show up, and I am like 50% guessing that Malini, as someone who is not literally but figuratively burned, is going to show some fire magic in following novels.
Isn't the whole deal? I think when they outline it in Malini's introduction, the whole deal is that the mothers burn to light the swords of the emperor. So it's like literally men get the cool fire powers based on.
No, yeah, I know, but that's definitely like what the belief is. But that's kind of one of the things. I think you were the one, Chris, that brought up the idea of faith. That, like, I feel like there's definitely the implication of the faiths in this world, but they're all like perspectives and hinting at things that are actually true of the world, but they're not all necessarily like perceiving it in a way. Like, they all have aspects that are actually describing the way the cosmos of this world works. They're just failing to grasp the entirety of it. You know, it's a bit like the people who worship the nameless god. They all get like a little bit of prophecy. They all get one prophecy, and they get like one bit of the picture. They don't get the whole thing.
Yeah, I think this book has the like coolest depiction of the Force. Full stop. Including Star Wars, because it really does feel like you're saying, like, all of these faiths are true. It's just like motivated by their, like, they're all sort of accessing the same thing, but depending on their perspective, they're getting like wildly different things out of it.
Yeah, because like the thing I was wondering is if, like, as they talked about hollowing out, if the burning is a kind of another metaphor for the hollowing, and that is like the kind of underlying truth of the worship of the burning mothers. But that's just a random thought going through my head.
There's also this weird, like, ancient aliens dimension that I know it. I like deeply hope it won't go deeper into. But there's like the Yaksa, you know, traveled here from another world, and are not creatures of this place, but they have left this influence. And like when you drink the deathless waters, you are being hollowed out and replaced with something of their world.
Yeah. So you said you don't mind spoilers?
No.
That's going to come up again.
Cool.
I did like I'm fond of the trope of that power. I'm always fond of this, that, you know, that the power irrevocably changes, you know, and not necessarily for the better. You know, because I mean, in so much, you know, fantasy literature, you know, it's just a matter of, like, you know, getting superpowers, and that's not interesting. It's much more interesting when, you know, the new powers come with some dreadful cost or something that you have to abandon, which the character cares about. And becoming sort of other, non-human, certainly qualifies.
Yeah, and I like the way that, in some sense, like, claiming magical power is like, and it's something that's definitely like brought up in other fantasy, like, implicitly. But I feel like there's definitely the explicit notion that claiming like magical power is just kind of one kind of power to claim within this world. It is like a lever that is like parallel to political influence or persuasiveness and charm. It's not kind of an ends unto itself.
Yeah. No, that is totally true. Like, again, another cool thing that I don't know how it resolves is like the complete dualism of Bhumika and Ashok, who are like You know, Ashoka is all in on magic power. He wants to become a Sith Lord and lay waste to his enemies. Whereas Bubaka like literally actually turned her back on her faith in order to gain political power, and now they are both like they are together the forces driving the rebellion. It's a really interesting piece of commentary that way.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is kind of getting to spoilers. She sort of like...
Do not
oh, okay.
avoid spoilers.
Yeah. She totally like what the thing that like that's kind of one of the cool revelations at Bhumika, that she totally sort of has been cultivating her powers as a temple child all along, that she's just been slowly cultivating this garden fortress that this entire time with her powers, that is sort of like the... I mean, it kind of plays into the sort of Jedi Sith trope that you're bringing up, that she's been growing something while Ashoka's been like honing this weapon of war.
The trouble I had with I'm going to mispronounce your name, Boudica. That's not Boudica. Boudica. Is that I don't see... She doesn't seem to have any flaws or weaknesses.
Yeah.
She just seems to, be perfectly self-possessed. She has, extraordinary powers. She has, contacts. She has political savvy. Her only negative is that she's, that she's in a political marriage, and she manages to get rid of that 2/3 of the way through the book. So at this point, she's boring. It's like, okay, you can do everything. Great. That's not very interesting.
Yeah, she even can give birth.
She even gives birth to a child in the middle of all of this with no harm to her or the child. Oh yeah, by the way, while I'm fighting the rebellion, I'll give birth to a child. I'll invent electricity. And they come up and
girl's strong as hell. I don't know what to tell you.
It's like, it's just, but it's not. It's a Mary Sue character. It's not very interesting, I'm just surprised that why let's have every other character be in love with her in particular. It's a logical conclusion.
Well, no, everybody hates her.
Yeah, love, hate.
To a certain extent.
It's a fine line.
Perfect characters are, if you ever met anybody who seemed perfect, you probably wouldn't like them. You'd either love them or hate them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Pretty sure it's hard to dislike Clark Kent.
Like, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I also feel like at the... Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I also feel like at the same time, like, in some sense, all of Bhumika's predictions about how politics can go end up being sort of proven wrong. And like, I mean, I know that she's definitely, I'd agree, she is like self-possessed even when she is like proven wrong about everything. That she cannot have this like peaceful transition to Ahiranian power that kind of peacefully exists within the Empire. But I feel like at least just a little bit like against the kind of notion of the Mary Sue, but that she does sort of represent like a political project that sort of doesn't account the like fair anger that exists within Ahirania as a way of like expressing or handling that.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, like she has various ideological failings, and she sort of represents the like, the flawed ideal of succession from within. But
as Stephen,
in terms of her actions in the plot and her like character as a human person, she is kind of perfect.
Yeah, I mean, if she, if she had doubted anything, her own sagacity or somebody else's faith in her or anything like that. That would have been much more interesting.
Maybe we'll get that in the second book. Maybe that'll be Bhumika's book.
Yeah, no. If you don't hook them in the first book, you don't get them for the second book. It's the rule of trilogies.
I think her main purpose is to act as a foil to Ashok, because he represents a different approach to resisting the oppressors, and it's interesting how they eventually get together. And as Chris said, he doesn't mind spoilers, so I find it quite interesting how the main protagonists deal with their siblings. So Malini has a very different relationship to her brothers than Priya has to her sister and her brother, even though they're not really related. I wasn't sure if Ashok is her real brother or not, but it doesn't really matter, I think. And so I definitely see that she isn't perfect, but I think you don't need her to be, because her main purpose was to demonstrate different approaches, and then they eventually come together.
I think probably what we'll do now is usually what I've done the past few discussion groups is do a check-in with folks, like if there are any like dangling threads or things we haven't brought up that they still want to bring into the discussion, and then we'll kind of move into our next part. I guess we'll go clockwise for me again. This is just kind of a check-in. Like, Michael, did you have any like thoughts, ideas, or things you wanted to bring up about the book that we haven't really gotten to yet?
Not really, because I expect that we're going to talk about things we might adopt or might not adopt. And I've got some opinions on that.
Cool.
But there's no lingering questions or anything I want to talk about.
Cool. And Chris?
We have thoroughly covered the front half of this book. I have no notes.
Have they kissed yet for you? Do they even kiss? I don't remember.
No, they make very meaningful eye contact, a grand total of twice.
Again, I know that there is in the latter half of the book, and the author has described it this way, so I'm just quoting her, a wet sari scene trademarked.
I'm really, water kind of means one thing in this book, and knowing only that there is a wet sari scene, I am making some wild assumptions that will definitely disappoint me. No one say anything.
I finished the book like weeks ago, so I'm like, shit, what don't I remember anymore? Sorry, I interrupted.
There's the wet sari scene where she's like, I will give you this magic flower that is a part of me.
Oh, right, yeah, I remember. I think I cheered.
And they're in the water and they're damp, although it's not much described, alas.
Look,
yeah.
I didn't need it to be explicit, so I have other books for that, so.
Yeah. Jolene, do you have anything you wanted to further talk about or bring up?
I mean, I guess did people enjoy the romance between them? Like, did they see the spot? Like, what were people's thoughts on the romance of this romance fantasy?
I have no thoughts.
I like the there's a connection. The one's denying. She's denying so hard. And I was like, girls, you need to get over yourselves.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think that the reasons why the characters, didn't want to make the connections were good. Although the way it presented was a little bit kind of caught me aback, because it seems like it kind of takes a stutter step of which is a little too much will they, won't they kind of. Maybe it's just the pace at which it happens, but Priya is super attracted to Malini, and then she persuades herself that, Malini's a terrible person. And then she gets over that. And it's like, okay, that whipsawed me a little bit. Like Joe, I love me a good, complicated romance. And I think it would have, in my opinion, it might have worked better if they had gotten together and then had all the reasons in the world to regret it and deny it and stuff like that, rather than have all the upfront angst about, should I? Because I think that's the way people work, really, right? That's that often impulses get you, and then you have all these reasons why what you just did was terrible, and then you have reasons for, self-loathing and acting out and all the other wonderful dramatic stuff that comes with messed up romance.
Yeah, I guess the other thing is I don't know, something about are people excited that this is a trilogy, or they rather have just been a solo thing, and if it sells well then there's more? But I don't know, that's just a bias that I have, because I'm they just got together and now they're breaking up, what the hell? So
I think at the end it's definitely said that Priya is going off to Malini at the end of the first book.
Oh yeah, it is, but it's also Boom is yeah, but if she doesn't do what we want, you should kill her. I'm what the fuck? And I was God damn it, lady. This is why I'm anti-Boom, by the way.
Oh, okay. I
was into her for most of the book until the heel turn at the end. I'm God damn it! I just want my girls to be happy.
Malini is rather doing a heel turn, in my opinion, because she's
power for herself, right? That's fine.
Yeah, but she's
doing it for
been a
themselves.
little bit evil the whole time.
Yeah, and she's going down the Daenerys route. I'm afraid.
I suspect this trilogy does not end well for the lovely couple. It doesn't start well for them either, and the middle's not great.
It's very bleak.
We'll see. I know that the author, I read a few of her other books, and they're all romance adjacent. So I hold out hopes a little bit.
Well, but although the elephant in the room has not been addressed in this romance, right? So circumstances put the two together.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense. But once they're no longer forced together by circumstance, you have an empress and you have a maidservant. Okay? And this society is not constructed in such a way that that's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be wait, okay, an elephant and a camel are shacking up together. Exactly how is that?
Although at this point, it's Empress and a plant terror goddess. So
yeah, but even so, it's still,
I feel that's not a fair analogy of elephant camel to Empress maidservant. Empresses have servants, so.
Yeah, no, I think there are ways for them to be happy together. I don't think they will ever be political equals. I don't think this ends with twin empresses.
No, but except that the way that with the trappings of the novel and things like that, the fact that there are political marriages means that there are things that there are liaisons that are completely unacceptable. Being lesbians is unacceptable where Malini comes from, just to start. Mm-hmm. Never mind the social crevasse that exists between her and her paramour. And so her society's never going to accept it. Maybe the Haranya people will, could get their heads around it if they harken back to the old ways. But there's no way that the Parjati people would ever do that.
Yeah, and that's the conflict I enjoy.
But I'm saying, but they didn't really. Nobody's even looked at that one.
Oh yeah.
It's like nobody's even brought that up. Oh, by the way,
Everything about this is completely impossible.
everything about the fact that what you're trying to do is doomed to crash, burn, and alienate all the allies you need, in order to accomplish what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
Nobody
but
even said that. I'm not saying it has to happen that way. You understand? That's completely different. I think love can conquer all, but it has to. But you have to put the walls up.
No.
You can't just kind of pay no attention to the fact that there are these giant obstacles and not have anybody even comment about it.
I think it's understandable why they haven't commented for the majority of the book, because she's not an empress. Like,
Correct.
She's a prisoner. So she's like, I can love this girl because, like, we're basically locked up together. And, like, oh, now I'm in charge. And, like, she just hasn't had time to realize that, oh, I need to try and change my entire society because I want this wife. Which, who knows what will happen, because I'm not going to read the other books, so.
Anyway, so.
I can give you a book report if you want, Jolene, because
Totally.
I'll be reading it in August. So
Yeah. There's another book, like, I can't remember. It was about, like, we could talk about that some other time, never mind. But I didn't finish. I'm like, this seems like it's bleak. I don't want to finish this book. I cannot see a happy ending. Apparently, it turns out great, so maybe I should get back to it. But
There's some TV series like that.
oh, I know. I refuse to watch Breaking Bad. I understand. It's not a happy show.
I made it through Breaking Bad. 6 Feet Under is the one that got me, because at one point they started to, every time a problem got solved, they would introduce 2 more. And at a certain point, I go, I can't watch this car crash anymore. It's just too depressing.
So that's me and my hanging threads, I guess. So
I've been thinking there is recently come out, because I was trying to think of like fantasy novels with a lot of lesbian kissing in it. Well, since you brought it up, I did recently read. Like there's not like a happily ever after, but there is a lot of lesbian kissing in it, and it's, well, I guess there's not a happily ever after where like a main couple comes together, but there is a lot of happily ever after and a lot of lesbian kissing, which is Siren Queen, which is like a fantasy golden age Hollywood novel.
okay, wrote it down. So yeah, like, I don't know.
Definitely don't read The Locked Tomb. That is 2 lesbians having the absolute worst time. And the second book in that series is legitimately like the bleakest, darkest thing I've ever read. I'm kind of amazed I got through it, TBH.
Wow.
The ones that I always end up reading or that were mostly recommended to me, it was like, yeah, no, here's this title, but like it's the thing where they don't get together till the end and then the book's over, so like I never get to enjoy them being together. So I'm like, well, this is frustrating. So.
Yeah, nobody gets together at the end of the Siren Queen, but she kisses several ladies along the way.
Nice.
But yes, anyway, on that note, no, so yeah, one of the things I kind of like to throw out here as a kind of thought experiment before we jump into talking about what we want to bring into the game is, like, we're going to be running with Hearts of Wulin, which I kind of brought up for a couple of reasons, which I kind of decided to run for a couple of reasons, I should say. But I'm wondering if people had any thoughts about, if you were to pitch to someone, like recommend games to kind of emulate the kind of themes, the setting, or any of that with a role-playing game, if you'd have any thoughts for folks. Because I have a few, but I want to hear from other people rather than just monologuing to everyone.
So during the break, I thought about it, and I'd suggest maybe hacking a Firebrands game. For example, Hearts of Magic. You could have different factions. and one of them are the locals, one of them are the colonizers. I forgot the name of the nations. One of them are maybe the temple children or whatever. And then you can have different scenes, and everything is character driven. You have making out scenes, you can have fight scenes, and I think that might be a way to an alternative.
And he's gone.
Understood.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts?
You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Someone was hammering outside of my door, and I didn't want to unmute
Yeah.
while that was going on. No, yeah, cool. Firebrand's definitely. I feel like the whole like kissing someone like mini game in Firebrand's definitely. I'm thinking now how slow burn that mini game is, and the way it really does kind of predicate this like kind of consent and trust sort of romance. For me, one of the things I was sort of thinking was that you could hack free from the yoke to sort of do this with kind of setting like you drawing some of the inspiration, but kind of playing specifically around with that kind of post-colonial element. I even think like with the kind of like I remember in Free from the Yoke, there's like one of the factions you can choose to have as like your player faction is the sort of like people who have adopted the foreign faith, and one of their moves is that they can have their own magic that doesn't work the way any other magic in the game works. And that kind of strikes me as working really well with this kind of rift between like the magic of the Yaksa and the magic of the like Burning Mothers was a thought for me.
Just to clarify, are we just presenting other possible system pitches?
Yeah, that was.
Okay.
This is just kind of like
I was like thinking like Hearts of Wulin works real well. There's factions, there's secret desires.
Yeah, we were going to get into why Hearts of Wulin worked really well.
Okay.
I just kind of always like to get this because I feel like it's fun for me at least to listen to other people's ideas, and yeah.
No, because otherwise I would have sabotaged this whole discussion because I really want to play Hearts of Wulin as well. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the systems I know. I don't know any good for this.
Yeah, just one thing. I don't see a game, but maybe a system, belonging outside belonging, where you give tokens, spend tokens, have weak moves and strong moves. But I don't see a particular game that maybe you have to write one.
Yeah. I also the other is that occurs to me is the Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power. But I definitely feel like the Yaksa and the kind of the notion of the I forget what they call, or the Unspeakable Power is like a mystical force in that game that you like have to make deals with and offerings to kind of gain its power, which kind of for me kind of plays into this. But yeah, I definitely think though, kind of shifting over to like Hearts of Wulin, there's a lot of reasons I liked Hearts of Wulin to run this, if only because the very thing that Jolene you bring up, that why you turned on Mumika, also strikes me as like that right there is a Hearts of Wulin entanglement right there.
Yep.
Like I'm in love with Malini, but my sworn sister demands that I kill her.
It's the best. It's the worst. I did think of one, but like it requires one system that requires a lot of work. But we've all seen other GMs do it. But Apocalypse World, like straight up Apocalypse World, has been thematically hacked into so many different settings that I'm like, oh yeah, here's the cult leader, here's the hard holders, like the city ruler. But like it can work, but it requires a lot of like one person to do the work.
Yeah. No, thanks. Yeah, that's definitely. Oh, now that you bring that up, I was also just thinking. Of course, I mean we could just say this for any option, but we can always just say Pasión de las Pasiones if we really wanted to just
go over the
troll
top
everyone and just say just troll everyone and say for every game just Pasión de las Pasiones.
Well,
yeah.
It works pretty well.
Yeah.
As long as passion is involved. So.
I'm also surprised that nobody said Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Because I wasn't going to say it at first, but like, it's the other thing everyone brings up.
TSL seems too like
that's
happy.
Fair. I've seen some agreement, like some kind of like agreements where we do really sad Thirsty Sword Lesbians, where they're all like, where like you actually say like straight up, you know what? Sometimes if you want to die if you want to kill a person when you like battle them, you can straight up do that in the fiction. It's just like usually we agree not to do that for a lot of Thirsty Sword Lesbians games.
I remember it. I played in the Thirsty Sword Lesbians Gashart one. Which was skinned for Star Wars, and it had a much more somber tone.
Yeah,
that's baffling to me because it's Star Wars.
Well, no, I mean it was I
guess Rogue One.
Life sucks if you're not Han Solo.
No, I mean, Star Wars people can die.
But you know what? Jetpack is having a great life. Let me tell you.
Was when where I was. The Lamia waitress at the diner. So it's an adaptable.
Yeah. And like I know in like the setting book, like one of the example settings is like a fairly low magic, like a little bit magic, but low magic, like medieval Japan setting where like there's a lot of advice for like here's how to straight up murder people and be sexy while doing it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, look. That doesn't seem hard to be sexy while murdering, right?
Yeah.
I know of Hannibal.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
So much Korean film, too. I mean...
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, one of the things that like the last thing I kind of wanted to jump us over to then is talking about bringing this over into Hearts of Wulin and like what we kind of want to pull from this book and what we kind of say is maybe like, this maybe like the really specific, like say like setting this in Ahiranya would be too like narratively limiting and maybe we wanted more draw like thematically and from the feel of Ahiranya without like playing in Ahiranya per se.
Yeah, like inspired by, but not beholden to.
Yeah.
Because, like, I know, like, the feeling when you set in a pre-established setting, you like, certain people might feel more beholden to it than others. So I'm guilty of that with certain settings.
And generally, I tend to approach even when we're kind of setting in a real play in another setting is that we are going to do it non-canonically. Like it is there, but it is not a canon that we are going to go. Oh no. That we have to like be true to like what it says on page 273. But yeah, so I'm curious to hear from folks about sort of for the palette, what are folks interested in kind of pulling from the book in terms of themes or setting elements, things like that.
I like the basics of a Haranya society, and in particular, I think that the setting of the rot is a really powerful world element to have. In other words, that some parts of the world have gone bad, and people don't understand what it is, and it's generally considered an untrammeled evil by most, but some people think it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the plant body horror magic stuff, I love it. So into that. I mean, the factions, we already discussed how, like, I'm super into the, yeah, no, this is my sister, but I'm in love with her enemy, which, is already built into Hearts of Wulin, so.
Yep. And will grow out, then that grows out of character generation, even if the setting doesn't have it. It's like, oh, okay, well, this person's your enemy. Why are they your enemy? Okay, now, now we know what some of the blood is.
Presumably, we'll have more factions than were presented in the book, because every character ends up with their own faction, generally speaking.
So there's one thing I'd like to bring up, and I'm curious what each of you thinks, not just the player, also the GM, and that's the setting and the vibe and the visuals. And I haven't decided yet. I have a preference, but do you want to emulate like South Asian setting, like in the book, or do you rather want to play in an East Asian setting, like Hearts of Wulin? I can elaborate what I think, but I'm curious. What do you guys think? Jolene, do you want to go first?
I'm good with either. Like, I like. Yeah, I'm not nailed down.
I love the standard wuxia setting, but I'd be perfectly open to to doing the Indian flair that the book has.
It's tricky because I really love the way, like, the aesthetics of the magic, and I think that's very much tied to the culture of the setting. I really want to preserve that. But like, literally everything else, I could take or leave.
The I don't know. I think it. You'll forgive the expression transplants well, because the Taoist, kind of Taoist, fairy tales, are full of nature magics. Earth, especially elemental magics, and the plant magic is very much like an earth magic in some ways. And certainly the wuxia tales of Taoist warrior monks that have spell in one hand and a sword in the other is a staple of fiction.
I guess the thing that I feel is missing, and I might just be unfamiliar, is the sense of bargaining. There isn't really, like, my understanding of at least the aesthetics of the sort of East Asian Taoist magic in from wuxia movies is that it's very much from within the person or as a result of training, and doesn't really have like a cost outside of like the devoting your life to the mastering this martial art. And that's not super in line with the book, because all of the magic very much comes from without.
That is an interesting distinction. I've seen some of the Taoist stuff where it's not just training, but it's actual sacrifices that lets you do magic. Like, for example, oaths. restrictions, privations, giving up things, vows. That is what allows you to wield power, is making yourself in some ways, cutting off some parts of your humanity, ritually, before, often ritually. And that, the training is necessary, of course, but, that often there is an ineluctable element of sacrifice. Giving up being normal.
And I think, like, what makes that work with Hearts of Wulin is that's like the narrative of what you have to do, and there's not the mechanical it's not mechanically tied to this cannot come from within, because it's just how it's played, right?
Yeah, even there is a move.
Weapons, right? But weapons can be, they're ambiguous because they're not it has to be this type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking of its kind of new technique move, but the new technique can totally be montage can totally be going off to bargain with a power for something new, because the 7 to 9 is always that there's a great cost to learning this new technique.
Do you have any preference in terms of the setting, Stephen?
For me, it was something I definitely love the feeling of some of its elements. I definitely feel like the Hirana, for example, for me, recalled more some of the South Asian Buddhist and Hindu temples than it necessarily recalls some of its East Asian counterparts a little bit. But I certainly see even in this, I definitely feel there is a lot of room for syncretism with the wider, with the East Asian world. I mean, particularly because I feel the nameless god, that faith has very much, for me, it felt ties to certain branches of Zen Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy of not the kind of self notion, but the or not Zen, but the notion of that the world has a kind of order to it, in which the best course is to find one's place within that fated order.
So,
which Taoism kind of has an overlap with Taoism, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just share my thoughts, and they're a bit more meta in a way, because I've got only a slight concern. And I'm sure we can handle it, because I've experienced the Gauntlet community and playing with all safety tools and whatever, and having that play culture, that's a good place to explore different things you might be not too familiar with. But I think it's important to handle a different cultural setting respectfully. And I do feel slightly more comfortable with the things that are provided within the book itself. So Hearts of Wulin, because it comes with certain vocabulary, name lists, tropes, and whatever, and that is actually helpful. And I'm pretty sure we can find something for South Asian setting as well, but it might be more work. So that's the one thing. And the other thing is just just a bit ridiculous maybe, but it's much easier to find like cool wuxia pictures on Pinterest than but I'm sure there are also many cool inspirational
Yeah,
pictures.
Bollywood is your friend. Like the visuals are out there.
No, but the first aspect is more important to me, and that's not necessarily an argument for playing just in an East Asian setting, but it's something I wanted to address at least. Yeah. So in the end, if there's everyone wants,
I mean, you're making the argument of familiarity, which is a strong reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
To prefer a setting. It's that if people kind of know the tropes for something, then that they'll have more impact, and things will not have to be explained.
Yeah, because that's my maybe I think too much about it, but when you bring up certain vocabulary and that's I might not be familiar with, or if we put some stereotypes out there that might not fit the setting or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely I hear where you're coming from, and I think it's something I will definitely think about myself, because I don't know if I have like a 100% my like complete take on it. But I'll also do some of my own research to see if I can find a like quick pronunciation guide or something like that, and if those resources are easily available, that would certainly or not easily available, that would certainly help us like figure out going into next week which way to go on that.
And I think either way we end up going, we're all going to do our best to be respectful with the source culture, because I mean I'm just white, so like, you know, I have no
same.
Okay. I can say with confidence, looking at us, that we are all in fact white.
Yeah, I wasn't going to make the assumptions, so
that's true. Yeah, so I've got a slight preference for the classical wuxia setting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm fine either way.
We could like, and also like, I mean, I know there's outsiders, so theoretically somebody could be from South Asian if they want it.
Yeah.
And that's literally when I'm like, I really found this cool picture, I want to use it, but
yeah, that's probably what I'll do.
Yeah, outsider can be anything, right? As long as they don't mind fighting.
Ms. Marvel also got me into South Asian stuff, so.
So there's another thing I want to bring up, and then I'll shut up. And that's something I didn't really enjoy, and I can see why it's in the book, but I'm curious if that's something you want to explore. That's the amount of sexism and misogyny. And sure, I mean, if that's like an essential part of the novel, we want to explore, I think that could be cool, but otherwise those would be things I'd put on as lines rather than veils.
Yeah, and I guess depending on how much people are willing to engage, want to engage with it, I'm fine if we want to put a line there. I also like engage like a kind of usually even in games where we're like I sort of like, it sometimes helps me to conceptualize that when we talk about like sexism and things like that, is it that we don't want to deal with people using sexist language and things like that, but we still want to have like, say, a patriarchy where like a character can play a princess who's being passed over for like the like ascending to the throne because she's a woman, but we don't want people constantly going, but you are a woman, for example.
I understand that questioning entirely, because like there's themes I would love to explore, but there's also I don't want to ever have to be in the position to say certain things or be misogynist with an NPC or something, and I don't imagine most players want to do that either. So
it's one of my favorite tools from what is it? Oh, it's that new game where you play mech RPGs, that meat punks. Is that like it's a game about punching fascists, and sometimes when a character says something, an NPC, one of those fascists said something fascist, you can just say, and then they say something really racist or fascist there.
There's also the fact that there's, to address Jillian's point specifically, I just ran a game where one of the built-in parts of the game that couldn't be lined was official misogyny. Okay, but all the characters are women. There's no PC misogyny. In fact, there's not even misogyny within the organization that they belong to, which is this regiment. But the infrastructure of the army and of the society they come from has, some fairly strong misogyny in it. And so you can have something where the world at large is misogynistic, or more generally speaking, has strongly defined views of sex roles, right? Because it doesn't have to be misogynist specifically. Mm-hmm. But where the player characters never engage in it, where they have accepted the fact that, we're all unusual people to a certain degree, and so we're not going to be the type to reflect society's values in that regard, even though we might recognize that we have to work within them. I think having social stuff to push against just makes the game better.
Yeah.
I don't require that anybody else think that, but it's like I like it when my character has to push against social barriers and other people's expectations and things like that. But yeah, nobody wants to be a jerk.
Yeah. An idea or thoughts are like, obviously I feel like a lot of us would be into anti-colonialism as one of the themes of the game, based off one of the themes of the book. And like playing off the misogyny, like it could be like that the colonials that are partly in power or whatever could be, from the very misogynistic or homophobic culture, whereas like the home culture is like there's probably some people that are, but it's not by and large the standard. I don't know, what are people's thoughts?
Yeah, and also I want to underline here, Michael, these are all just ideas we're throwing out. If like a line on misogyny is something you need to feel comfortable playing the game, like that is totally cool as well.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm really open to it. So, but thanks for bringing it up. I like what Jolene said, but I'd prefer it to be a bit more gray, because in the novel I thought it was really black and white. There was the evil emperor and the queer and oppressed ones, and then we're going to play thirsty thoughtless ones.
Yeah, which and a concomitant of that too is that if I'm playing unless the game is specifically about fomenting a rebellion, I like my political situations to be complicated, because that way different people can have different opinions on them. If it's simply like, okay, occupying power is bad, rebel is good, that's kind of dull. or if it's like, okay, our side, this side instigated a war, and they're occupied now because they lost the war, but they started it. Then that's more interesting. Just to take an example, people can have different. There can be more entanglements to talk about women, or you can love someone even though you think they're on the wrong side.
Yeah, and I think this is actually, Michael, this is actually kind of a nice segue here, that the other thing I wanted to go around and ask some folks about were, like, kind of what are some of, like, I guess if you're going over setting yeses, what were kind of some of the no's we wanted to like, say, like, well, this was in the book, but we're not as interested in doing it this way. Like, I hear from Brandon kind of and Michael that we want kind of more gray areas than is necessarily in like the book. I'm wondering if there's also anything else we kind of want to say are things we want to like leave behind in the book or not as interested in kind of drawing from the book. Or that we think we might come up, but we just don't want to necessarily like see.
I don't want the element of the book that I would not want to see in this particular role playing game, I think, is the book itself is enormously centered around the Yaksa, the Deathless Waters, the lost culture of the Aranya. That's pretty much the spindle on which everything turns, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, there's an evil empire and stuff like that, but really that's what this book is about. And that's, I think, too, I wouldn't want something where it's like everything has to be about this.
Right. Avoid the universal MacGuffin.
Yes. Yeah. Because, I mean, that's, which is, it's fine for book. I don't think it's as much fun as a role-playing game. Unless it works fine as a kind of framing thing, but I don't want the action to be about that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So yeah, I just want to check in. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to bring up? So actually, I'm not sure. I don't recognize the. Is that the full name RRR, or is that stand for something? Because I don't recognize the abbreviation.
That is the name of the movie, RRR.
Well, it does stand for something. It's like something rebellion is the name of the movie.
So like, it is, but it also isn't. But it's just called RRR because the R stand for multiple things throughout the movie. But it's Rise, Roar, Rebel, I think.
Okay.
Like what comes up in the one like title card.
In the one title card, yeah.
Yeah, and like another one, it's fire, water, and then something else.
Okay.
But like, it's a real good movie. It's like, it's from India. It is their most expensive movie ever made. It is the most successful movie ever made. It's got their two biggest actors that have never worked together before, with the biggest director.
Okay, cool.
In specifically Tollywood, not Bollywood.
Yes.
Is not quite as big, so it's not like there are more expensive movies that exist, but let me tell you, the RRR is narratively, and especially in the special effects department, a feast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, and by expensive, like, it was 70 million, which is less than, like, so many movies over here.
Cool. I will definitely look that up. But yeah, I feel like we're kind of hitting a point where people don't have much more to say. So I just want to give a thanks to y'all for taking part in another discussion group. I had a lot of fun talking about the book, getting a chance to hear from y'all, and I'm really looking forward to what we put together like next week.
Should we get a rundown, or is it on the character keeper somewhere?
a rundown?
Yeah, like, did we agree to Wuxia?
I realized that was something I think that we are more or less agreed that it feels like probably edging towards Wuxia.
Yeah. Okay.
That works for me. So yeah,
I think
said,
I've got a question.
Yep.
Sorry for interrupting, but you're wrapping up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then just a quick question: are we leaning towards supernatural wuxia, supernatural playbooks, and whatever?
Yes, I think that's what I have opened up in the character keeper I sent out a few days ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Then I had a question because I was looking through it. I'm like, what's the stuff in red meat?
The red stuff is the stuff specifically added with supernatural.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
Like the other stuff is in the base playbooks. I also added in, Michael brought it up, I think, that there is sort of already a setting in the worlds that has a few playbooks for being kind of in like the Joseon era Korea, that sort of focuses on like injustice and rebellion. Which is like, it's a popular period in K-drama for those very kind of themes. And there are a couple playbooks that might work pretty well, if you wanted to be like a rebel character, or like a character who is like leaving behind some dark past, which I also added to the character keeper as options there. But yeah, just checking. Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up? I'll also take any questions people might not want to ask on like while we're recording afterwards as well.
Is there anything we should prepare? Besides reading through the playbooks and so.
Yeah, we can read through the playbooks. I don't think that there's anything we super need to prepare. One of the things that we'll usually kind of ask is to flesh out some factions for our world to kind of help drive the plot. So if you want to brainstorm ideas for factions, I'll be doing a little of that myself. But yeah, look at what playbooks interest you. If anybody has like one they're like really super gravitating towards now, feel free to bring it up. But yeah, well, I will open up that I, as a player, am like, I just don't think about my characters until like the day of, and I am sitting with the playbook in hand. If you want to put more thought into your character than that, feel free. But I generally expect people to think about their characters as much as I do before the game, which is not at all.
Yeah. I found art. I'll figure something out. But mostly, I just like, I've played Hearts of Wulin multiple times, so like, I am good picking playbooks after others. So.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thanks everyone for showing up. I had a lot of fun talking to y'all. I will be seeing y'all in a week as we start in on our run of Hearts of Wulin. Until then, I'll be seeing ya.